Today's presentation, what is new in TopBraid EDG 6.4. Today, Top Quadrant CEO and co-founder Irene Polikoff will demo some of the new capabilities in 6.4, as well as take some questions at the end of the webinar. With that said, let's review a few logistical items. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along by using your GoToWebinar controls. To post questions, please look on the right-hand side control panel. You should see a drop-down box for questions. If you click on the box, you should be able to post your question at any time during the presentation. We will address as many as time allows at the conclusion of the webinar. We will also be recording today's webinar and we'll send a link to the recorded version as well as to the slides. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Irene?
Thanks, Christy. Okay, so typically we start webinars with some introduction to Top Quadrant, but with this type of what's new webinars, I am assuming that most attendees are already familiar with Top Quadrant, and many may in fact be current users. So we're going to jump in right away into the 6.4 release, and majority of the presentation today will be just me demoing new features, and then we're gonna have some Q&As. So first of all, let me talk about the status of 6.4 release. It is currently in beta. It has been in beta for a number of weeks now, I think probably about a month. And right now we are targeting a release at the end of July, maybe first week of August, but hopefully by the end of July. You can download the beta version and participate in the beta. There is still time, etc. I am running an intermediate version. It's not beta. It's one of the intermediate releases. In case there's any hiccups, bear with me. It's a beta kind of thing. So with that, here's the list of items that I will go through, kind of some of the key features, not exhaustive list, but some of the new features that will be shown. I'm not gonna read through the list. You could read through it itself. Also, while I'm gonna be demoing most of it today, the presentation has a screenshot for the majority of the features I'll be talking about, so you could go through and see that there are some screenshots about what will be shown. So this, and they are annotated. This is to help you remember what will be shown, also serve as a reference. With that, let me switch, and sometimes maybe I'll go back to the presentation and just to remind myself as to what I'm yet to show. So I'm going to keep myself on this slide that gives a list. Okay, I'm going to start by showing first this new feature called announcements. You see some changes to a number of changes to the home page, hopefully. So typically on this upper left corner, you normally see kind of in 6.3, you would see some blurb about TopBraid EDG. So this area became fully customizable through the announcement feature. And the way to get to announcements, they are stored in a governance model. So we're going to go there and just narrow it to announcements. And you see that I have 3 announcements here. One is the standard TopBraid enterprise data governance blurb that talks about what TopBraid EDG is, and then 2 custom ones that I have created. And the way it works, each announcement has a start date and end date. So I've ended this standard one, expired it as of July 6th. And that's why it's not showing, but I have an announcement about the webinar, and I have an announcement about the data governance board meeting. So in addition and as you could see, they have no end date. So if I were to change the end date, then the announcement would expire if I would put the end date prior to today. And there is also order, so that order indicates to the system in the order in which those announcements are displayed. So that's a little bit on announcements. Other new features you see on the homepage is that there are a number of new widgets. So for example, you see this simple one, workflow summary, and this will indicate if you have any workflows waiting for your attention. And if you click, it sends you to my workflows page. There's also a panel called What is Happening, and that will show you the most recent events that what other users have been working on, what you have been working on. Here I'm running locally, so I have only one user myself, administrator, and you could see all the events, etc. So let's let you know what's happening in the system. There's also this new kind of a widget that talks about all the different types of asset collections that are in Edge and the number of collections. So I've got here 2 taxonomies, 4 reference data sets, 8 ontologies, 1 content tag set, etc. So that gives you a way to see what is in your system at a glance. All of this is configurable, and that's also a new feature. So if I click on myself as a user, you see updates to the user page. One update is that now you could add your avatar, in other words, your picture that you could pick. And the way it works, if you mouse over this area, you could edit it and choose a file. So if I wanted to switch myself to this nice looking gentleman, I could do that. I don't know that I want to do that, but you get the idea, and this becomes this becomes my my avatar. And you could also configure what kind of gadgets. There's different areas that I showed on the homepage. Like, do you want to see announcements? Do you want to see workflow summary? Do you want to see what's happening, etc. So every user could configure it for themselves. And we were also asked by some users to introduce more contact information. So you could now enter your name and your phone number, and so other users know who you are. So that's on the user information and personalization of the homepage. Next, I'm going to talk a bit about ontologies and changes that were introduced, because basically, irrespective of what package of TopBraid EDG you have, you will see some of you will experience those changes to ontologies. And by the way, one thing I forgot to mention is that now when you look at like comments or endorsements, asset endorsement is also a new feature in TopBraid EDG. So you see not just the user ID, but you'll see their avatar. On a slide in the presentation, you'll notice that that's depicted there. Okay, so let me let me go to one of the ontologies that I have, one of our sample ontologies, and show you some new features that we've introduced to make it easier to create ontologies. So let me show you. For one thing that we've added is simplify creation of inverse property links. Prior to 6.4, so you see there is a relationship between currency and country called issuing country. So if I wanted, prior to 6.4, if I wanted to create an inverse relationship from country to currency, I'd have to go to the country and basically enter, remember to put a head sign in front of that property, have the ID of the property, etc. So now all of this business is not necessary. I could just go to this relationship and say that I want to declare inverse property, and it will already know that it's going to the currency, and it's already pre-populated the path of the property, and all I need to know to do is to enter a label. And now, if we go to the country, we see this new relationship, and it correctly points to the class currency. So that's one new feature in the ontology. Another new feature that I'm going to show quickly is those of you that may need to, so ontologies in TopBraid EDG use Shackle, of course. Those of you that, sure that's on the export. Those of you that may, for whatever reason, need to export the model for use by external system and want to have it in RDFS or OWL, there is now an option to generate RDFS and OWL from Shackle. This is not available in the beta. As I said, I'm running a version that is post the version that we released in beta, but it will be available in the release. So this is in addition to the transform tab, which used to transform, can transform your RDFS OWL to Shackle. So now we have the mirror kind of option that lets you export from Shackle to RDFS and OWL. And another feature that we have is that you could get model auto-generated from data. The way it works, there are actually two different options. One is when you're focusing on the ontology source itself. So yeah, I'm kind of in the home graph and on the home resource. I could select derive missing classes, and then I could pick what asset collection to use instances from, and based on that data, TopBraid EDG will generate new classes and will generate properties for those classes as well. And you could also do something similar when you focus on the class. If you have some data that contains instances with some property values that may not be reflected in your model, you have this option, derive property shapes from instances, that kind of works the same. You also have this kind of dialog. I will demonstrate it by creating a brand new ontology and walk you through the entire process using Kennedy data graph, which is also one of the samples. So let me create a new ontology. This is, by the way, also new, create new asset collection dialog. Before you had just a drop down, now you have all available asset collection types all available in your installation listed and a little description. So let me create something called webinar demo, and that's all I'm going to do. So at this point, I don't have anything, no classes, no properties, nothing. And as I mentioned, I will derive those things from my candidates data graph. So if I were to go now and pick this option, there's no selection for me. And this is because in order for this to work, the graph needs to import my new ontology. So I'm going to go to candidate family, and I'm going to change its includes. So right now it includes some demo ontology I've created previously. I am going to remove that, and I'm going to include my webinar demo. All right. So now let me go back to my ontology and try this again. Try missing shapes. So now I have an option. I could use instances from candidate family to derive classes and information about classes. And this is what I'm going. Okay. So there are just two, there are instances of two classes in that candidate graph. There are people and colleges or universities. And you see that it's not just created those classes, but it's also created, property shapes for all the properties. So that's as simple as that. So if you have some data that's already in RDF, but maybe you don't have a model for it, or you don't have a complete model, then the workflow for you to use is create an ontology. You could keep it empty, create a data graph, load your data in that data graph. It actually doesn't have to be a data graph. It could be any asset collection that contains instances. Include the ontology in it, and then run this process to derive your shapes from data. And of course, that was introduced in 6.3, and it still remains in 6.4 as well. You could also derive your shapes from spreadsheets and get some from Wiki data sample and so on. All right. So let me see what's next on my agenda. All right. So I talked about ontology creation. I'm going to move to talking about new association panels. And let me show you how that works. So actually, by going to one of my reference data sets. Yeah. And I actually have already one of the association panels selected. So let me close this out. So there's two different associations panels. One is a panel that says hierarchy of selected assets. So if I bring this on, so anytime you click on an asset or resource in TopBraid EDG, you could explore related information by picking on any of the available relationships and keep going. Keep going down this hierarchy. So this is what this panel does, and it's it's specific to the resource that you selected. And as you could see, we could go up and down the tree as far as it goes for each relationship. So it doesn't matter the kind of relationship you have, any kind of relationship can be explored this way. Now, there's also another panel that is called assets hierarchy, and this is for the entire asset collection, not just for the selected resource, but for all resources. So the same thing for everything. And what you do to get started with this, you specify what type of resources you should use for selection. In this case, I've used I6 section class, I think. Yeah, and that was already set up. If I changed it, for example, to division, then the highest node in the hierarchy will be all divisions. So yeah, you could see that. So this is how you determine what that panel displays, and each user could do that. And on the Manage tab, that also can be set as a default for the asset collection. So you see a root shape of asset hierarchy panel, and this is how you could set that. So very useful. We've been asked for the hierarchical views beyond just taxonomies, and that is in response to many requests that we've heard from our users. Now, just like any here, like a taxonomy hierarchy panel, there's drag and drop capability, and also within a tree and between a tree and a form, and you have your right click, so all your edits and other iterations are available here. So it's a fully workable panel. It's not just display. You could do various things with it. All right, the next feature I am going to talk about is templated queries. That's a very important and interesting feature as well. And to do that, I will go to the geography taxonomy as an example. And I'm going to switch to the Sparkle view, because these templated queries are basically Sparkle queries that can now be saved as reports. You see, I already have a query here, and what this query does, it looks for everything that has a preferred label in English, but doesn't have a preferred label in Russian. So that's a useful query, and of course I could save it, and other people could run it, etc. But quite often you want to have this more generic. And by more generic, I mean, what if I want to have everything that has a label in German and doesn't have a label in English, or anything that has a label in English doesn't have a label in French, etc. So to make this possible, your variables, things that you want to potentially change in the query, can be introduced using $sign. So instead of having this hard-coded English in the query, I could say $sign language 1. And instead of hard-coded Russian, I could say $sign language 2. These are my variables now. And now I could save this query. It's now a templated query. And let me save this. I could give it a name, just as I was able to do previously with regular queries. So I could say webinar translation example. And you could determine the scope where it should be available. Just in this taxonomy or all taxonomies, you could make it private shared. And then as far as parameters, you could say if they're optional, and you could also specify their data type. So in this case, it's a string. Okay. So this query is now added to the library. So I have this webinar translation example, and I could run it, and I'm getting asked for the parameters. So let me do English versus German. So it's going to be a little bit different. Yeah, so I've got somewhat different number of rows. And that's basically how this works. Very useful feature, I think. And if you no longer like the query, you could delete it. Of course, you could. This gives you create a URL, and then if you want to just not run it but just show it in the Sparkle Query panel, you click on that button. Okay, the next feature I'd like to talk about is GeoSparkle and GeoSparkle queries. And that's something new in 6.4, of course. For GeoSparkle itself, what you need to do is, for the asset collection where you want to be able to do this, you need to enable GeoSparkle and related features. TopBraid EDG will maintain a spatial index to support those queries. There's also a map panel that uses Google API, and for that to work, to conveniently see results of your queries, you need to set up your, you need to get your Google API key, and this should be map API key for JavaScript. And that gets entered in the system administration area for Edge configuration. So that basically lets you bring a map panel. It's called Map Explorer. So I'm just gonna bring it here. And let's take a look at an example. I already have an example GeoQuery for you to look at. So and I'll show it in the Sparkle panel. So this query basically says that get latitude and longitude of London, and then find all cities that are within a certain radius. And I picked here a radius of 300. And that's just basically found all the cities that are within 300 kilometers of London. In the slides, you find a link to all the supported types of geospatial queries. There are different kind of things you could use. You could use distance, and there are just many different functions and options that you could use. And of course, now that you have this query, you could, thinking about the example that we just went through with templated queries, you could think about how you could template it and just like turn London into an argument, and then other users wouldn't even have to know Sparkle. They just would provide the cities that they're interested in, and then they get the nearby cities. I mean, this 300 can also be turned into a variable instead of being, hard-coded. So that combination of these things becomes very powerful. And map not only just displays locations that we found on the map, but it can also display areas like bounded areas and figures on the map as well. So that was a map example. So let me see what else is next. And by the way, with Google API Key, you get some number of free queries, but if you want to use it seriously, the maps, and there are some fee for using the API. Okay. Ability to import some new importers. So the cataloging of spreadsheet dataset, and then imported zip and TriG files. All right, let me show you that. So I'm going to create a new data asset collection, and I'm going to call it webinar. And create data asset collection. And at this point, it's empty. So there's nothing here. And I want to start cataloging some data sets. So you know that TopBraid EDG, or some of you may know that TopBraid EDG has ability to catalog databases, so using JDBC and a few other features like that. So in 6.4, we also have ability to catalog data sets from spreadsheet data. There is also a similar feature for JSON, and I think there's a separate explanation about how that works that I may point you to later. So what I could do here is choose a spreadsheet, choose some kind of a file, and I have actually that's not the file that I want to use. Hold on a second. I'm going to find my my example file. All right. So I want to use this airports. I want to use this airports file. And all you need to do is just click submit, and it will look at the information in that file, and will catalog this creating. Okay, so creating new data sets. Let me focus on data sets. I got two data sets, one called airport and one called test, because that spreadsheet has two worksheets, and it will create an instance of data set for each of the worksheets. And then it will, this is one of the little buglets in the beta. So then for each column in that spreadsheet, it creates the data element. It gets some profiling information. It does some data sampling and so on. It gets some information about data elements. So you can see here data type, and I actually changing this as I speak to bring in even more information, such as min, max, length, and all the other profiling type of things that you normally see from databases will also be available for data sets, and again spreadsheets, JSON, and so on. The other feature that I wanted to talk about, also related to import, is ability to import TriG files, and this RDF turtle files that contain multiple data sets. That, I think, is best shown in going to an ontology. And that's simply on the import tab. So if you pick RDF file, you will see additional options here. So first of all, you could now pick zip files, and that's to make it easier if you have large RDF data sets that you want to upload. Instead of unzipping them, you could upload them in a zip format. And then there's also this turtle plus notation, and that has to do with RDF-based reification, which was introduced in 6.3 and actually extended in terms of importers, exporters, and various other things in N6.4. This is a pretty technical matter. So to explain more about the use of RDF plus and RDF-based reification, I'll probably do a blog soon that will go into details of what was changed in regarding that. One thing that I want to point you to, just so that you're aware of, is that okay. So let me see. Show properties that have no value. Okay, so this is the reification area where you could do reifiable by. So there is also a new option called index, and that lets you create ordered lists. I'm not going to demo it in detail today, but I will address that. That's basically just true and false, but I will address it in a blog that I am planning to do. And finally, for the TriG import, so where you see TriG file import is on the pages that list asset collections. So here, for example, on the ontologies page, so if you have a TriG, instead of creating one asset collection at a time and loading data for each one at a time. So now what you could do, you could import TriG file, and if it has multiple graphs in it, multiple data sets in it, TopBraid EDG will automatically create an asset collection for each of them, and will put data. So from that file, put the correct data from that file into each asset collection. So that's to make it easier to transition and load TopBraid EDG from your existing RDF data. And also creating ontologies from existing files. If you have some files in a workspace in your custom project that you want to use to create ontologies from, that's that option that makes it possible to do with one click. So I guess in this topic, I kind of went back to all the various shortcuts for creating ontologies, but now focusing more on how you transition from your existing files to ontologies in TopBraid EDG. All right. Another important feature that we have introduced in 6.4 is ability to do document attachments for any resource. There is a new attachment panel, and to demonstrate that, I will actually go to the server, because to do this, so I switched from my local running Edge instance to one of our servers, because in order to use attachments, you need to configure S3 buckets in the server administration area. So now I'm going to server administration just to show you how that is configured. There is a new option called external system integration management. And this is where you point to S3 buckets, and they are basically file directories in the cloud. It's just Amazon S3 that you create, and you could, add the new bucket configuration. As you see, we've got several buckets configured here, and of course, you specify authentication type. So you should use credential, and then you're going to be able to enter key and so on for the buckets that you've established on S3. So that's kind of my S3 my S3 bucket. And you could test connectivity with them. So that's everything is good. So with that in place, you could then now upload files as attachments to any resource. And to demonstrate that, I will go to ITIL glossary, and there is new panel called attachments. I could position it, for example, like this, and you see I've already attached something. Or you could position it like this, however you like. So I've got some documents that I want to attach. Actually, I've got a change management policy. So I'm going to choose that file. And that's my binary thing. So I've got a policy that I want to upload and attach to this resource. So I actually uploaded this before, so it's already available, and it detects that this document is already in the bucket. So it lets me to continue to upload, and then it will create a new version, or it lets me say, okay, just attach the existing version. And now it's attached, and it could be downloaded, looked at, etc. So this is available to all resources in TopBraid EDG to give you ability to store, connect additional information, documents, policies, or anything else you want to document those resources more. And now, okay, scheduling of file export. So if I go to the Manage tab, another piece of configuration that is done to work with attachments is that for a given asset collection, you're picking up which bucket to use. So which bucket, S3 bucket attachments are going to. So you see that it's using Irene's bucket, and I have two other buckets that are also available. Similarly, you could pick a bucket for export, and that will let you schedule export. Let me try this. And to explain this feature, this is something that we've been asked for as well. Users want to perhaps take data in TopBraid EDG and export it periodically as files, and have those files go into some selected location. And what this will do is these files will go into S3 bucket of your choice. So the way it works, you put the asset collection that you want into a bucket, and I think this one is already in the bucket, in the basket. So you could actually add multiple asset collections to the basket, and in this case I just have one, but you could put as many as you want, and then you select the ones you want to iterate on, and you can run some iterations. So one of the iterations is export to S3, and that gets you some dialogue where you pick a format. They could be files could be compressed, etc. And it will do that for multiple asset collections, as I said. And then if you click submit, it will actually schedule the export. It will run in the background. And the reason for that is because this could be large collections of data, large graphs, large data sets. So therefore, we give you ability to compress and give you ability to schedule that, so it runs independently and does not impact your current use of TopBraid EDG. And I think I covered majority of the things that I wanted to cover, except for one new, very exciting and very important feature, which is called active data shapes. This is a pretty technical feature, so I probably won't be able to do it justice. It basically lets users write JavaScript against auto-generated API for all the resources in TopBraid EDG. There is already a number of demos and examples for this. It was introduced by our lead developer Holger Nobloch in a webinar a few weeks ago. You could for the Lotica group, you could go to it, fast forward to minute 40 and see about 40-minute presentation. Holger also recorded another shorter, like 10 minutes video for how to create a custom importer using this approach. There is an extensive documentation and tutorials on this topic on this web page that you could look at and take advantage of, go through tutorial and so on. I am just going to show. I'm just going to show new panels that will let you write those scripts and test those scripts and run them. One of the available panels is shape scripts themselves. So if you bring it here, you could see that basically you could write whatever you want in JavaScript for the selected resource, and then you could save it as actions on those resources. For example, new operations could show up under modify or explore or whatever menu. And this is all explained in depth in this tutorial. And if I, for example, show, there's a few other panels, and so this panel is available only in the ontology, the one that lets you write scripts, and they are saved in the ontology. There is a number of other panels that let you run those scripts, and they're available every place. So there is a new script editor panel and script results panel, and essentially you could pick any resource, and that lets you select properties of that resource, for example, arrow, and then you just run, and you see everything that's narrower than Africa, which was which is my selected resource. And similarly, it's already generated object kind of API, so all available properties are here. I don't think we have anything related to Africa, so we don't have that available. It's a very large feature. Well, it's, let's say, probably not large, but important. It's a very important feature that makes possible lots of new capabilities. So we are very excited by that, and it makes it quite easy for developers with kind of typical regular skills, those that know JavaScript, configure, extend, customize TopBraid EDG in pretty much unprecedented ways. So it gives a lot of power, a lot of additional flexibility in customization. So with that, I think I want to spend some time answering questions, and hopefully we have some
Yes.
lots of interesting questions, because I covered quite a bit.
Yep, we do have some questions, Irene, so we could go ahead and get started. If you haven't already, please submit your questions and discussion points in the question box located on the right-hand side control panel. But we'll go ahead and get started answering those that we do have. Here's a first question, Irene. Can I reinstate an announcement that has been stopped when there are multiple announcements or messages? How do you set the precedence or order in which they are displayed?
Yeah, I think I showed the order. So the lowest order going to display first. So there is a field called order, and so this has 0, this has 1, so the lowest order will display first, and so on. And this area is scrollable. Right now I only have 2 things, so there's not much to scroll, but if there were more announcements, it's scrollable. And about reinstating, everything that's displayed is driven by the start and end date. So if you want something to disappear, you set the end date in the past. And if you want something to reappear, you remove the end date or set it to sometime in the future, depending on how long you want this announcement to be displayed. And similarly, you could kind of schedule new announcement to appear in the future. So you could create an announcement, and maybe you want it to start showing a week from now. So you just set the start date accordingly.
Great. Let's move to Q2. You showed setting up a UI view of panels for the GeoMaps example. Can that be saved as a layout that a user can reuse?
Yeah, most definitely. Any combination of panels can be saved as a layout, and then you could come back to that layout as needed. And for those that have not worked with layouts that much, so I'm just gonna do this, and I'm gonna bring the Map Explorer panel like this, and I want them side by side. So now, if I wanted to have it as a layout, I could save current layout, give it a name, and then it will be appearing in my layout view, making it easy to come back to it.
Okay. We'll go to the next question. You showed a number of new things in 6.4. Are there more that you haven't shown?
Yeah, a very good question. In fact, yeah. So I mentioned endorsement of assets. So like, for example, you've cataloged data sets, and some users are using those data sets and they want to endorse them. That's a new feature, ability to endorse them and others to see endorsements. There are some changes to workflows. Just a workflow diagram display that was kind of cleaned up, and now diagram view and textual view is separated, for example. And there are a few other things in terms of what you could do with workflows. There is a set of changes to the lineagegram. I think it's becoming even more capable and has been extended to show more information. So yes, there is a number of other features that I didn't go through today. And the best way to understand what's contained in the release is to go through the release notes and then the detailed changes log. Let me see if 6.4 has been linked here. Yeah, I'm just thinking, how do I get directly to 6.4 release notes? And so you go to support on the resources support portal, and then you go to release notes. What you're going to see here is release notes for the most current release, which is 6.3. But to go to 6.4, you simply change this to 6.4, and these are release notes for 6.4. And you see all the high-level lists explaining changes, new features, and so on. And you could also get a detailed log of changes, and every single change is documented there, and clicking on it is basically will download it for you. Keep in mind though that this log of changes was uploaded at the time of beta, and we have added a few features since we released beta. For example, I showed exporting RDFS and OWL that has been added after beta was released. There's not that many of those changes, but a few were. So if you were to download it now, you're not going to see those changes, but when the release is going to go out, then the change log will be updated and you will see all the changes.
Thanks, Irene. I think we can get a couple of additional questions in, perhaps. Let me go to the next question. Is there capability to export taxonomy to Excel?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was there. That was always there. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe I'll show. I mean, you've got all sorts of Excel exports. You have there's a three export that you could get three exported in Excel. There's also export from the search panel. So you could set a number of search criteria and filter columns and the kind of columns that you want to show here. So let's say I don't know, alternative label and broader concept. Yeah, and you could then export, and you could run searches, and then all of this can be exported to Excel, etc. There's options to export to Excel all over the place.
Okay. Let's try and get one last quick question in. Can the Sparkle template query be run through an HTTP endpoint?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And as I said, when you look at that query, you see in the library there was the icon that gave you an option to look at the HTTP URL that you could use to invoke that. So I believe so, and you would just provide parameters in your created request.
Great, thank you, Irene. We are already over the hour, so we'll go ahead and wrap up today's presentation. There are several questions that we did not get to, but we will be providing answers to those questions in the form of an email response to all attendees. And again, you'll also get a link to the recorded presentation as well as the slides. So thank you for your time, and we hope you found today's information valuable. Thanks, and have a wonderful day.